And in terms of what they call indigenous solutions and indigenous wisdom and local knowledge. So it's without paying much attention to the fact that it is unequal, and it is, they're talking about really, really poor people. And then, of course, romanticization is also very easily accepted by our own governments, where we also tend to, really glorify some of, it's essentially a glorification of poverty that we indulge in. So maybe if you can address some of that, what does it mean to both reject capitalism and capitalist solution, and this idea of green capitalism versus fossil fuel capitalism on the one hand, but also not romanticize, the current this ideas of the fact that people can deal with a huge crisis, which is not of their own creation, by themselves, given the state of knowledge that they possess right now. But we'll have a set of questions before we have the responses.
Chairperson talked about one is the romanticizing the local practices and other is the capitalist vested interest. But there have been third alternative also from person like say Chipko movement in 1972. They also went into the political economy of development and gave what kind of disaster it had made, and solution did not come even there. What about Vandari Mathai, who challenged agro-business of the West and also simultaneously also promoted Green Belt movement. Vandari Mathai from Africa. So Green Belt movement, how would you view it? Because it doesn't romanticize the local practice. It says that it exposes the vested interest of agro-business and says that hunger in Africa is not created by Africans, it is created by the agro-business and the vested interest. Where whole cropping pattern was damaged, their subsequent production was damaged, and the commercialized agriculture, mainly the fruit culture, was brought in mainly to subserve the interest of the global north. So, how would you see such movements?
More questions?
No, my remarks have to do with, and going to be a short remark / question. I don't think there is one green economy proposal, and I think there has to be, we have to distinguish between many green economy proposals. So, for example, there are proposals that talk about giving subsidies to the corporates to sort of green the economy, to adopt green technologies, and then there are other kind of more social democratic proposals where people have asked the governments to spend more and finance public spending through more taxes on the corporates. So I think there are many green economy proposals. So to sort of treat them equally may not be a very good idea.
Maybe a couple of more questions before we go to the first round of responses. No questions?
We haven't been asked. It seems we have not been provocative enough.
Okay, we can have the first set of responses then.
Okay, let me go provoking. See, since there are no devil's advocates from the audience, no advocates, no, shall we say, contestation from the audience, let me play devil's advocate to my own argument. When it comes to climate change, and you look at the time scale of climate change, then you ought to be careful of the environmentalist response. Okay? That what the hell, you can't wait for, you've been after socialism for now 100 years. Look where it has got you. So if you say that we are not going to deal with climate change unless I have socialism, and then without socialism we cannot deal with climate change. And Naomi Klein has a very eloquent argument saying, without socialism, how can we have climate change? At the end of the day, all she can propose, unfortunately, is divestment from fossil fuel stocks. This is like saying, at the end of it, it seems to me, after all the rhetoric, it's like saying if you say boo to capitalism, then it will kind of get scared. So, so we have a real problem here. What is the time scale of serious climate change, and what is the role of whatever it is the social and economic order we are stuck with? Are we going to get rid of capitalism or have a system that is better, etc., over the next 30 years? Is there anything that in the time scale of social and economic transformation of this country that lends us that confidence? In 30 years, we'll have serious climate change impact around. What we have seen is only the beginning, and the real problem partly is that we are not even very sure what these impacts would be. Uncertainty is a big thing. So what is the balance? So how do we deal with it? I think this is a serious question. So, I think there is room for, as you said as Vineet said in his remarks about green economy, there are room for a variety of solutions. So I think you need to incorporate the question of dealing with climate, dealing with questions of sustainability in some form, and I don't pretend to know what is the answer, in some form into the challenge which remains of improving the material and spiritual well-being of peoples all over the world. So how to achieve that integration is, I think, one challenge. Here there are theoretical challenges. You take green economy, for instance. The beauty of mainstream economic theory, classic capitalist economic theory is as Marx beautifully says, all that is solid melts into air, So, all the mysticism is thrown away. Nature is something you use. So if you use something, it has got to have a price. And if it has to have a price, you need some way of fixing what its price is. Now you say, no, it is priceless. That's obviously absurd. We keep transforming the environment all the time, willy-nilly, consciously, unconsciously, as capitalist, as farmer, as petty producer, whatever. So what do you mean saying, capitalism, nature is priceless? That's a dead-end argument. After that you have no discussion. So what is an alternate method of understanding? One, what is it that capitalism sees as value when it talks about value and the environment? And what is the alternate formulation within which we can frame this discussion? This is, to my mind, a completely unsolved problem. So which is why you find that a lot of mainstream environmentalism, which began with very solid anti-capitalist credentials, today are all into red plus. Madhav Gadgil also wants red plus. Community is here. So this is, I think, a real challenge before us. And just one point about gender, I think, to my mind, gender has found some purchase in the international discourse on climate action. In the different countries it happens differently, but the thing which has zero purchase, I swear to you, is class. So the International Labour Organization, bhatakta hai in the corridors of Bonn, Kanpur, Paris. Uska address hi nahi. Among all the panel discussions, there are hundreds of them. The number that deal directly with labor are like, you can count on the fingers of two hands. So in India, we want to get rid of, there are 1.5 million people who depend for their livelihoods on that sector. What are you going to do about it? So I would say class, perhaps to my mind, is the most serious. And while one is prepared on issues like gender, to say that, nature, nurture, there are all kinds of various arguments in which gender issues are positively, especially the feminist viewpoint, is positively linked with environmental conservation. The working class is considered as complicit in environmental destruction because they work for the capitalists.
That's the whole basis of the whole paradigm.
No, but the point is that comes from regarding capitalism as a system of consumption. So I think, to my mind, I agree that gender by no means has reached the level of awareness and the way it should be absorbed into policy making, which is desirable, is very far from that. So are other forms of exclusion. But I really think that the battleground where we have not even started the argument happens to, at this point in time, happens to be class.
Yeah, well, I disagree because obviously, surely class is there, but women are also part of that whole argument. Gender is a part of that argument, and it's not an either or, Jayaraman. I think there is, I don't agree with the sort of romantic eco-feminist view at all, because I think they are taking out the issue from the realities of the manner in which society is structured. And you can't say that women are automatically nurturing. I do not believe that at all. So, even if there are some women who have come up with solutions that are really far-reaching in terms of the impact on the environment, it's not because they're nurturing necessarily. It is in specific spaces, it is specific solutions that they've come up with, like the women in DDS who have come up with the thing of conserving seed, for instance, and biodiversity. But that was very much linked with their survival as farmers, and not necessarily only because they were women, but certainly because they were concerned about the kind of food that was given out in the ration shops, and their traditional foods were being marginalized, and therefore impacting their incomes and their agriculture. These are the women who then organized and put in the whole thing of bringing back the growth of these natural. So my point about gender was that it should not be an either or, and also that it's a perspective. I'm not talking about a gender day at dawn. That's the same thing that we've been arguing against for decades, this add and stir business. It's a perspective that ought to inform. And capitalism is also patriarchal. And that is also what has to change. It's not just capitalism, it's patriarchy that has to be undone also. And that will impact everything in terms of environment and policy and climate change. That is what I believe has to be integrated into the manner in which we look at these things. So when you talk about new strategy, Tejal, I think the thing is, in my view, a new strategy will arise out of change of perspective. So it's not a technological fix. There are many technological ideas. These things cannot be fixed technologically as we know in this country. And I think it has to go beyond the technological fix into looking at these issues from these kind of lenses, where you recognize the people who are most affected and why they're affected, what are the systems. And personally, ideally, of course, I would like that we could bring about a change in the entire system. But I think realistically, one has to also plan what can be done now in order to ensure that you alleviate at least the people who are suffering the most and who are most marginalized.
So, let me first of all say that you see, this whole question of class, in my perspective, actually climate change is a class issue, whether it's for women, whether it's for Adivasis, whether it's for Dalits. It's not as if women are impacted by environmental change. Which class of women are impacted by environmental change? So that's what the issue is, that a woman sitting in critical arch is not impacted in the same manner as a woman sitting in the forest. Now, if you look at it from a woman sitting in the forest point of view, a woman who has to walk 5 hours to get her fuel and get her water and all this, I'm sure, some amount of technological fix can also reduce her gradually. So it's not always as if different segments of society are in tune with the environment, but the way in which we conceive of conservation can also create contradictions for the interests of different segments and sections of people. The way in which we conceive of conservation, the way in which we conceive of conservation not as basically preservation, but even use as a way of conservation and what type of use. That is one question. Now, as far as you see the alternative is concerned, my point is simply this, that you can have incremental steps towards an alternative, but you should know where you are going. You should know where you are going. And I only brought it up in order to push the theoretical pale of the argument to talk of alternatives. What type of development do you want which is outside the capitalist commodification of nature? And therefore rethinking value also. One has some ideas on this, but it's obviously a very, very difficult question, because then the intermediate steps that you suggest, including the incremental changes, will have to be in line with that broader solution or vision. And to my mind, the first intermediate step is to regulate the concentration of wealth coming out of nature. To regulate the concentration of wealth coming out of nature and the redistribution of that wealth in a manner that provides a decent livelihood to different sections of the working classes. Yeah? So I can't hope for, forest conservation where, basically the fuel wood being used by poor people is dependent on their labor time for other things. I mean, I'm just giving one small example and one can get into it. One has done some work on this fuel wood business also, one can get into it. So in response to the need, it's not a matter of what kind of green economy you are suggesting, because according to me, the discourse on the green economy has not been about distribution. It's largely been about how to generate the finance, taxes, this, that and the other. But the class question in it is who's benefiting, green from whose point of view, who's benefiting and how that benefit is being distributed. I'm not at all suggesting that there are no incremental changes in it. Yeah? But they are only incremental changes, they are not systematic changes. And secondly, on this environmentalism of the poor, Chipko movement, Narmada, this, that and the other, this whole Joan Martinez area and all this. Actually, Paul Burkett's recent work has done a really good critique of this. And he, in fact, my own work is a critique of this type of environmentalism also for two reasons. Firstly, I consider most of these movements basically as protest movements. They are basically protest movements and their idea of an alternative is only about local. How does that local fit in with the larger picture is something that these movements have not really talked about. What was Chipko's alternative? That you hug the tree. But what was the alternative of Chipko?
The alternative was that you don't hand over forests to loggers and that you allow communities and
Yeah.
forest dwellers.
Yeah, but none of these movements.
Which has come back into forest policy now when forest dwellers themselves are given some.
But that forest policy is largely about devolution of functions. It's hardly about devolution of, decentralization of decision making. No, GFM and all this community forest management and all, these are words. But what meanings these words have in the actual policy is debatable. There's a raging debate on Forest Rights Act and community forestry just now, and actually most of these movements not against private property also. So I think one can have a larger debate on these movements from the point of view of getting a constructive middle ground. A constructive middle ground between class-based movements and these movements, given the nature of the attack. But in my own work and in my own perspective, a critical engagement with indigeneity, locality is also important in order to drive an alternative. It's not only a critical engagement with capitalism, but also a critical engagement with locality, and this thing is important. And even within the local society, the structures of accumulation are important to analyze. The structures of accumulation, who's benefiting, who's losing, that's where the whole caste question becomes so very important. And in land and all, these are really issues that people are now actually dealing with in a big way. Even in gender, like we ourselves did this work on agricultural policy for women farmers. The NCW had made a committee in 2009 line the cold storage. But what did we deal with? We dealt with the issues of ownership. We dealt with the issues of distribution. We dealt with the issues of access to food. I mean, how can we say that access to food is not an issue in the environmental debate? That becomes really silly. It becomes, a lot of people say that actually. But all I'm saying is that whether, romanticization of local production is the only solution. It's something that we need to discuss.
Production versus agro-business.
Can we
There's nothing called subsistence anymore.
have another set of questions, I think?
Hello, I have a question specifically to Ms. Kalpana Sharma. So, in contemporary writings related to the issue of land ownership rights for women, there is evidence to show that women Marxists, particularly those from the so-called indigenous communities, they are a significant chunk of women Marxists are actually against private ownership of land on one hand, but then again we acknowledge how important land ownership rights are for women. So how do we resolve this dialectic, and does the problem also lie there? Like the whole this thing between, like as Marxists and as feminists, how do we resolve that this thing? This is just something I came across in the Vanderbilt article, so I just wanted to ask, how do we resolve this?
Yeah, a few questions. Okay.
I think now we have
I think, ma'am, as Kalpana said, that gender is not an add-and-stir argument, kind of situation in the climate change debate. I think caste is also not an add-and-stir. And I think, sir, what you said with regard to that nobody, about people working on labor, I think we have to understand that who performs what kind of labor is determined by caste. And this is something that we need to look at as well with regard to the climate change.
Just to add to that, because we spoke about the Chittu movement, about the Narmada Bacha, about Deccan Development Society, perhaps they don't seem revolutionary to us because we don't acknowledge that access affects different genders, different castes differently. And people are perhaps involved because it's affecting their private spheres, and patriarchs within the same movements are not acknowledging this or the revolutionary nature that it can take. So even that middle ground that we spoke of then ends up being a burden on the marginalized, ends up being violence again. If you could address it.
Sir, as you spoke earlier, I could relate to the idea of collective consumption in the socio-economic order by Manuel Carstens and how he talks about capitalism. But still, when we talk about climate change and the sources in the capitalism, how capitalism has refashioned in the last 50 years, theoretically, and there are still not much writings on that. Refashioned itself, how capitalism has displayed itself and reproduced itself over a period of time. So when we talk about the alternatives to capitalism also, is our understanding of capitalism not enough to deal with all these issues? Theoretically, I'm sorry.
One more at the end.
So, like, the entire conversation, there was barely anything about the technology part. So, when we boast about these modern technologies and climate change aspects, so if you take the recent Loki and like the state of Kerala with the high human development index and all these things, like when we talk about the unexpected climate change related things and the communities, like if you bridge it with the technology, even in this era when we boast about technologies, the communities or the fishermen population or the coastal, they are not benefiting out of whatever is already in place. So what exactly are we talking about bringing up the climate change topic and linking into the communities? And shed some light on it.
Vinny has one more.
I'm afraid that the final fix has to be a technological one. I mean, if we are planning to reduce emissions or reduce the growth of emissions over a foreseeable future, it has to come either through a change in energy mix or a reduction in energy per unit of output. So typically change has to be a central component of how we address the issue of climate change in the next few years.
Okay.
Yeah, so to your question, I'm not an ideologue, so I can't give you an ideological answer to that. But I'll give you a practical answer. And as I said, there's capitalism, but there's also patriarchy. It's a system that has to be undone. And I think often when you're trying to create a revolution and change, make bigger changes, perhaps the first step is an important step. So in my view, the first step of ensuring that women have ownership of land, that begins to undo some of the relations till such time as you abolish private property altogether, which I don't see, at least not in my lifetime. So therefore, I would advocate a first step of that kind. On the thing about the movements, I think somebody said, I think, see, either, again, it's a perspective. Either you see all these interventions in terms of your ideological framework where it doesn't fit in because it's not dealing with what you see is central, which is, abolishing class and creating a non-capitalist society, or you see it in a continuum of creating awareness in people in the fact that there are systems that are depriving them of their rights, and then it can be taken forward. Try and imagine without that kind of awareness what it would be. And this is the way I see it. It's a practical way of looking at it, maybe because I'm a journalist and I'm not, as I said, fixed in a particular way of looking at things. I see the value of movements like the Narmada Bachao movement, because it brought into conversation the whole aspect of destructive development, which I think till then, the whole thing of large and big had been romanticized so much that nobody looked at the impact of these large and big technological fixes on the lives of people. And I think this brought it into the conversation. Of course it has to be taken forward, and I don't think they were perfect, and I don't think they came up with solutions that were sustainable. But they were a beginning, and I would say that given that the problem is so large, the point now is to have solidarities rather than us getting into these kind of divisions where we believe that one lot is not doing exactly what ought to be done and therefore we go off and do something else. I mean, I think let's really think, I mean, particularly now in India, I think we are facing so many problems at so many levels, not least the environment and climate change, that I think this is the time for actually opening our minds to different ways of doing things so that many more people come on board and that we are not into our little silos and echo chambers where we think only we have the perfect solution.
Okay, first let me answer some of the issues about identity and class and patriarchy. As a person who's working on labor issues and labor market issues, in my perspective, actually the way in which class formation is taking place, or the working class formation is taking place, it's mediated by gender and caste. It's mediated by gender, ethnicity and caste. That's why you see concentrations of different people in different occupations. So it's not as if, these are either or things. They are basically a complex of interrelationships that go into the making of a working class. Working class is not some abstract thing. It's basically a composition, a social composition of people who actually work. And if certain people are concentrated in certain types of jobs, then that means that there is a mediation, a social mediation taking place of the class formation process. So, the dialectical interrelationship between social structures and class formation, which according to me is very poorly analyzed in social sciences so far. It's very poorly analyzed because it's always seen as one versus the other. After all, the language of protest can be in particular ethnicities. But do those ethnicities basically represent the whole group? Maybe not. Maybe not. For example, if you see Adivasi identity, the dominant identity is that of Oraon and Munda and Santhals. Now, the smaller groups are and the most deprived groups are probably not represented in it also. So, I think we have to deconstruct the question of identity if we want to really have a complex understanding of identity politics on the one hand and class politics and its relationship with class politics on the other hand. And some of us have been working on that and we've written also on it now. Now, as far as this whole question of movements is concerned, I think there are two things to be understood. One, that when Narmada, Chipko and all these came up, certainly they contributed to the debate. They even forced class-based thinkers to sort of open out their horizons. And there are people like us, we wrote theses on that also after that. But the point that I'm trying to make is something simple. One also has to recognize that Narmada movement, the limitations of the Narmada movement, and what was that? For example, in 1994, the All India People Science Network called for a meeting of all the stakeholders. Alternative was proposed, and the NAPM refused. But the NAPM won't say that today, because there's a historical evolution of the movement also. But the NAPM refused to participate in the discussion of the alternative. The NAPM refused to. So it's not as if class-based thinkers are ideologically what should I say, exclusionary or isolationist. The same comes from the other side also. And I'm not saying the other side as an adversarial side, because if you look at the situation today, after the Supreme Court judgment of Narmada, in fact, they have been forced to take the help of many class-based movements who have also now gone and made alliances. So why did it have to come to that failure in the first place? To come there. Why did it have to come to that failure? This is a question I asked my friends. I mean, I was considered a very environmental friendly person on the side of the left by the environmentalists also.
I think we should rehash that.
But all I'm trying to say is that today, when the dominant structures are also trying to project the community as an alternative within the market system. Within the market system, I think there's a need to deconstruct the community itself. Otherwise, we are feeding into that discourse. We are feeding into that discourse. And if we feed into that discourse, then we have a problem. And we have a problem with this as far as the technology part is concerned. Of course, but which kind of technology, towards what end? Technological fix towards what end? Technological fix that basically creates more profits for the corporates. So, so all I'm trying to say is a question of choice also. The technology choice also has to be debated within the whole question of technological fix. The whole question of technology choice also has to be debated, and that actually hasn't come up into our discussion so far.
I don't want to rehash. I entirely agree with the point that Kalpana made about women and the ownership of land. So I think it's, in fact, it is what you mentioned as the debate is actually a very old debate, where not necessarily framed within the context of women ownership of land in particular, but generally whether the ownership rights to small producers, those the peasantry, whether that is the crux of what one should fight for in a permanent sense or in a transitional sense towards property rights-less dispensations. It's a classical debate, so the general conclusion has always been on the lines of what Kalpana said. Yeah, I agree that I'm happy that two people raised the issue of technology, and you mentioned community, so I've given my take on modernity, so let me give my take on community first. Unfortunately, part of the problem of community is, it's the term, where does it fit, okay? So for instance, if you take a village and you say that there is an association in terms of both productive activity and social and cultural sense, that they are closely interrelated and tied together. There are relationships of dependence, I'm using the word in a neutral sense, dependence which pull them together. There is also a spatial and localization that is involved. If you say community, then it sort of begins to say something, but then of course you should be careful that it does not, in doing so, that you do not occlude all the enormous differences that exist within this quote-unquote community. The second problem I have with the term community is in the urban context, not community, or neighborhood. The bus driver in BEST, he is part of his location as a member who lives somewhere, okay, and he has his neighbors, etc. So this community is spatially localized in the sense of neighborhood. He belongs to a trade union, and that is an association where there is a real relationship which is of a different kind. All of this is not entirely, mediated by caste. Some are, some aren't. So there is we have a society in transition which still remains, taking care of the burdens of its past which have never been properly erased. So much of what we think is unique to capitalism in India has nothing, I think, to do with capitalism. Caste is not a necessary complement of capitalism. You look around the world, capitalism functions recognizably as it does in India without any mediation by caste. So I think we must remember the contingent character of caste when studying society and particularly capitalism in the Indian context. And then we should, of course, for India, caste matters. Whatever you do, caste and gender and class come together. There is a package, and then one has to proceed further to understand. And there I agree, perhaps with a slightly different emphasis when you say solidarity, with Kalpana mentioned. So I think we must agree on what we can do by way of action. But as to how we understand things, the fact that we may not all agree and the fact that we will continue to debate it and discuss it is a given in some sense. But that shouldn't stop us from getting together to act in whenever is possible. My last point is about technology. And I think it's a very important point. We sort of dropped it on the way, not really focusing on it. Let me go back to the question of seeds. See, the practice of conservation of seeds, that is, whether when you say it is traditional, we have some evidence to show that this is traditional in the sense of 150, 200 years. Nothing which happened from time immemorial. The practices of seed conservation were not were in poor shape in 18th century India, for instance. There is some evidence to that. So that's one thing to discuss. Second point is that climate change will present inevitably conditions where what we are used to will definitely be transformed. And their old practices, established practices, however much they may be in equilibrium with present conditions, will not work. And so new things have to happen where the role of science, including genetic modification techniques to deal with abiotic stresses, etc., are going to be critical. The same applies to, I am very happy that Archana brought up the need to inquire into locality. And let me one more point about technology I just want to say. For instance, Tejal and I have decided more or less, unofficially at least, that we won't work on improved chula kind of stuff. I think the answer is to move to cleaner fuel. 30 years, 40 years we have done improved chula since I was in school. And we have sent people repeatedly into the field, the chulas fail. I think Jayaraman got that one right. Give everybody, you call it a subsidy, handout, populism, electoral promise, do what you want, signi do, 6 mahine ka cylinder ka paisa do, baki afterwards you try and pay as much as you can, give them 6 cylinders, 9 cylinders, 12 cylinders at subsidized cost per year. It will cost nothing. It will move radically our women out of the range of indoor pollution in a dramatic fashion. I think on this I am firmly with Mrs. Jayaraman. So abhi to improve chula ka kuch kaam nahi. वो निकालने का. So this is, there are other things to say, etc., which I won't want to get now. My last point is about the community. I again want to emphasize. You see, community-based climate change, community-based disaster risk reduction, the famous is a formula that goes around. You go to the text or the guidelines, etc. For community, you can replace NGO. You look at the NDMA guidelines on community-based disaster risk reduction. There are guidelines for what NGOs should do in the rural areas. I don't think it works. I think what we need is representative self-government, and the representative self-government should be the authority of overseeing the task of disaster risk reduction. And they need to be equipped to handle it, and eventually as they acquire that equipment, they will actually intervene. So in Kerala, where I am somewhat involved in this stuff, my slogan has been that we need panchayat-based disaster risk reduction. Let us talk of representative government. Otherwise, there is always the environmentalist temptation, very strong, of in the name of the community, you ignore the representative institutions claiming they are corrupt, etc., and you sneak around the back of these institutions and you go to the bureaucracy or the minister to get your thing done. This is the ever-present temptation. So I think we need to recast this properly and place it in the context of representative government. Will representative self-government work as it should? It does not. Doesn't do so at the national level. It doesn't do so at state level. Will it do so in the village? There is no guarantee. But there is no way you are going to bypass it by substituting it with civil society organizations or whatever. We have to confront it. And the problem of democracy was that is a problem at all levels, not only at one particular level or some particular level. Let me stop. Thank you.
We have finished a little more. Do you have some more time, maybe? Or we do have another 15 minutes, so if there are no questions, we can have. There are
My question is, the move to a green economy in its alternative form, what would it mean for a laborer?
Okay, any more? Let me answer that well. People think that one now. In practice, green economy for a laborer means that he is going to lose his job in whatever it is he was doing, and he will make money by installing solar panels. Okay? I was reading about Germany, and that's how they count it. So, some X 100,000 people would lose their jobs in various things. And then, what will they do? They'll install solar panels where they'll get 200 permanent jobs and 1,500 temporary jobs. This is the kind of balance. So this is completely unfortunate. The rational use of, in Marx's famous phrase, the rational use, the capitalism proceeds by the relentless exploitation of soil and labor. But if you want to replace it, you have to replace it by the, the rational application of resources and the capacity of human beings to do things, be productive, be inventive, whatever. So this is very poorly thought out, I assure you. All they basically mean is, you will lose your old jobs, we might provide retraining for others. Part of the problem of the mining communities in Britain, when Margaret Thatcher died, they were dancing in front of the pub. They were celebrating her demise. Was it environmentalist, anti-environmentalist, were they pro-global warming? I don't care. But the Germany, this is true. Poland is desperately fighting to have 2 new thermal power plants. So the question you raise is a good one. Unfortunately, the answer is we don't know yet, and we have to work this out. It's serious.
In just 2 minutes, let me just say that from the ILO's perspective, green jobs and green economy means self-employment. And self-employment means increase of unpaid labor, period. Which means that today, in fact, the answer to jobless growth, even of your great Mr. Modi, is make in India through startups and self-employment. And self-employment means that you basically exploit self-exploitation, this whole China side of self-exploitation, and increase unpaid labor. So this is what it's going to do to labor. Unless you have a green economy which generates jobs rather than destroys jobs. Now, one thing that I just wanted to in 1 second respond to the Jayaraman thing of smokers chulas is that I don't think smokers chulas is an alternative, but decentralized co-generation of sustainable fuel is probably something that one should think of, because that also means decentralized distribution, and that also it should mean. And I don't know, I'm just throwing an idea, it's not something that I've investigated so much.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that Jayaraman gave 12 cylinders to women. I also subscribe, I subscribe to the clean fuel. I think, this Ujjwala scheme was not thought through at all with consulting women. So the story that I hear from journalists who've been looking at it is that the first cylinder is given free, and the chula at some subsidy, and then they don't have money to buy the second cylinder. So the cylinder is kept basically as an ornament in the kitchen and used when they have guests, unexpected guests, and they cannot light the chula. And this is an example actually, to me it's an example of a technological fix, a policy where you haven't talked to women.
So let me wrap this up now. I think it's been a good example the last couple of hours of the range of debates and the difficulty of addressing some of these questions, because people ostensibly also on the same side differ quite substantially from each other on a lot of issues. We have the debate on centralization and decentralization, which is very essential in this regard, and whether decentralized solutions necessarily are more equitable or not. Take a look at all of the centralized services that have been provided much more equally, for example, in the past, electricity or railways and things like that, that require broad infrastructure. On the other hand, you also know that there is exclusion. So there is, so you can't get away from the fact that there are different movements that deal with specific forms of exploitation, oppression, that also don't agree with each other on many things. For example, the Wiriter movement may not agree with the question of decentralization, or the question of indigenous knowledge, technology, or even on the concept of community. There is no homogeneous community in that sense, and the community is exploitative. A village community is not the same in a non-tribal setting as it would be considered in a tribal setting. Even there is a huge difference. On the question of gender, class, on every single issue, there definitely is a difference. And that is obviously also coming together in some sense of some ideas of how we need to go forward. We know we can identify some problems in different ways of thinking about things, as well as some common ground, and I think that common ground is what we should eventually seek out, because these are really some of the urgent problems of our times, dealing with climate change and transcending some of the debates on the traditional debates on environment. It's not only traditional practices that need transcending, it's also the traditional debates that need transcending, and I think it is an opportunity to do so, and I'm glad that the organizers thought of this kind of a panel, which would at least start the conversation on this. So I'll end with this. Thank you very much for everybody who's attended.
We would just like to offer some small mementos for coming here to speak with us. Thank you so much.